Justice League Doom was released in 2012 and tells the story of Vandal Savage stealing confidential files Batman has compiled on all the members of the Justice League and learns all of their weaknesses. This movie serves as a spiritual successor to Justice League Crisis on Two Earths and is based on the Tower of Babel storyline from the comics. And it presents, in my opinion, one of the best setups for a Justice League story. What if Batman's own contingency plans were used against him? And it leads into that great scene of Batman realizing that the Justice League is under attack. Before that, let's just talk about the cast. The cast is an A-list cast for this movie. We got Kevin Conroy as Batman, Tim Daly as Superman, Susan Eisenberg as Wonder Woman. The entire Justice League is just a star-studded cast. And it's special in my opinion because a lot of the Justice League movies that came afterwards were set in like this alternate universe. They were trying to do this New 52 thing, so they ended up hiring like new voice actors to voice in those movies. And I think it did kind of lead to me kind of missing the voice actors, the classic voice actors. And this movie, in for those reasons, is even more special in my opinion. Um, but the movie starts out with a pretty normal, pretty familiar bank robbery scene featuring the Royal Flush Gang. And right away, we get a reintroduction to the Justice League, watching them, handle a routine mission in like spectacular fashion. And each hero gets their own moment to shine and like showcases their abilities and it shows their teamwork. We see Batman, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, and we are also introduced to Cyborg, who is serving as sort of an intern role for the Justice League initially. Um, but basically, after they kind of, get done with the Royal Flush Gang, they discover that they had some sort of high tech gear that helped them get into the bank vault. And there's immediately like a mystery set up there, like who provided that for them because, the Royal Flush Gang, I guess, couldn't make that on their own. And Batman goes back to the Batcave, and there's this great scene with him and Alfred, with Alfred kind of serving as like a concerned parent, and Bruce just being like a stubborn child. And I think it just like their dynamic is on full display there, and it's a small but effective scene that adds like charm and familiarity, which I think just makes the world a lot more enriching. But from that, we do see in just directly after in that next scene, we see Mirror Master basically phase out of the rear view mirror he was hiding in the Batmobile. And he goes in and he steals the files from Batman's Bat computer. And then that leads into our next scene, which introduces the villains for this movie: Bane, Metallo, Cheetah, Star Sapphire, Mirror Master, and Malafak, with each villain being having a grudge against each member of the league. And Bane in particular, he gets a pretty fun introduction scene with him walking through the swamplands of Louisiana, and then an alligator or a crocodile comes out and snatches him into the water, and then all you see is just him rising out of the water and cracking the neck of the alligator because he like activated his venom overdose. And I thought it was just a really cool, really great introduction scene to showcase like Bane doesn't play around. And shortly after, we do see that they're all confused who gathered all of these villains together, and it's revealed that it was Vandal Savage who seeks to create the Legion of Doom and wants to bring down the members of the League because they could stand in his way for like he just basically wants to destroy the Earth so he can like rule it basically. But we do learn something pretty interesting about Vandal Savage, and I think it was a good choice to make him the villain because he's this sort of you know uh, eternal, living figure or whatever. He's granted eternal life from this rock that crashed down onto Earth, and he's lived all these sort of different lives. He's been a thief, an artist, a poet, and uh, above all else, he was always a conqueror. A pretty good choice for the villain of this movie because he was granted eternal life from the rock that came down, and I think it like gives him a great backstory because he's lived so many different lives in so many different professions. He's been a thief, he's been a priest, he's been a conqueror. I think it would have been really cool to see just a movie of Vandal Savage like and his like different lives that he's led like across his entire life. And but we didn't really get that in this movie, but he is still, I think, a good choice for the villain in this movie. And his basic plan is just world domination. He wants to like get the sun to basically destroy like 2/3 of the Earth, and so he can like rule over the planet. It's it's the regular kind of thing. Um, but what follows is like we see one of the I think like greatest deconstructions of each member of the league, and each villain uses Batman's contingency plans to, I think, devastating effect. And they're not just all like generic attacks; they're like psychological and physical takedowns tailored specifically to each hero's greatest vulnerabilities. And Superman is tricked into exposure to a kryptonite bullet, nearly killing him. In this really great scene where Superman has to, kind of try and connect with this reporter who's threatening to jump off a building, who is is Metallo in disguise. But I really like that scene of Superman, trying to um, connect with other people, even though he's this like otherworldly being with all these powers. But I like it when Superman has to come down to earth and just really relate to like his fellow man. But it's revealed to be Metallo in this really great animated scene of him tearing out of the reporter's skin, and it's really really cool. And then Wonder Woman is trapped in like an endless battle of illusions, causing her to fight until she collapses. Martian Manhunter is set on fire, which is his ultimate weakness, with like a chemical that like prevents him from like sweating or something. Uh, Green Lantern is pushed into self doubt, making him kind of relinquish his ring, and it was a little bit confusing. Like on first watch, they don't really do much to introduce like the context between like the villains and like their grudges with the heroes. You kind of just have to know going in, which always a little bit confused me in the scene with Green Lantern and Star Sapphire. It always like I always didn't really understand the dynamic. I like since like I've watched this movie a bunch of times and I've learned more about the DC universe. I do kind of understand it a little bit more, but I still do think they probably should have done more to like kind of define what that uh, relationship was. Um, but Flash is forced to run at full speed with a bomb attached to his wrist, which threatens to explode if he ever slows down. And Batman is buried alive by Bane in his parents' grave, which is a cruel but like so poetic, fate. And I think each attack is very brutal, methodical, and just terrifyingly effective. And it just makes Justice League Doom so compelling. Seeing this great idea and seeing how it's executed, and how the heroes aren't just like physically defeated, but they're broken down psychologically as well. But of course, if the plans were too effective, then the movie would end. So, a lot of the Justice League members aren't actually dead. For some reason, Bane does not decide to kill Batman. Don't ask me. No, they obviously did that because the movie would end there. But um, basically each member of the Justice League has to basically they have to get up from like ground zero. They have to, reconvene, regroup, and regather themselves and come up with a plan to, counterattack. And the final it leads to the final battle where they all basically uh, go to Vandal Savage's lair, or his fortress dome thing, skull dome. And it leads to a final battle, which is it's kind of regular. It's not the most compelling part. I think the most compelling part are the way the Justice League is defeated, and then some of the scenes at the end, which we will get to. um but yeah, the Justice League, they basically beat the Legion of Doom. There's nothing really that happens. That's too crazy. They beat the Justice League, or they beat the Legion of Doom, and Cyborg also helps out, like pretty well, in like stalling Vandal Savage, and they stop the sun from exploding the planet, and hooray, everyone wins, except the bad guys. And Vandal Savage is given like eternal life in prison or something, however that works. Um, but it leads to, I think, the best moment of the movie. Alongside the deconstruction and defeating of the Justice League, it leads to, I think, the two best scenes at the end of the movie. The first is basically Batman is almost in, Justice League court, if you will, with all the Justice League members kind of uh, basically, questioning Batman, like, why would he do this, and like, would he do it again? And Batman does say, he stands by his morals and his beliefs, and he says, in the same circumstance, I would do the same thing over again. And of course, everyone objects, and Cyborg is also randomly promoted to a full-time position, I suppose, which good for him. Batman basically says, if you people can't see the danger in not having a contingency plan, I don't belong here. And then it leads to this great scene with Batman and Superman, where uh, you know Superman basically says, you're so egotistical, you didn't even have a contingency plan for yourself. And Batman says, I did, and it's called the Justice League. And it's just and Superman, of course, is like, oh yeah, I knew. but I'm just making sure. And I was just like, oh man, that scene just shows you everything there is to love about Batman and Superman's relationship, their friendship, their bond, right there in that little scene. And I think that's something this movie understands so well. They understand the Justice League exceptionally well in this movie. And I wish we had more of these Justice League movies. There's not that many, but this was definitely such an enjoyable movie to watch. And I think if you watch this, I think it'll just remind you of that classic. Like if you love the Justice League cartoon, the Batman the animated series, the shows of the past, I think this will definitely be a pretty nostalgic watch, and I think you should definitely give it a watch. For me, this movie is going to get a B plus. I think it is an excellent Justice League movie. I think it falls short a little bit in some of the scene, like some of the the third act, final battle, that's a little bit boring. It's just League members, they gotta win stuff like that. But the setup and the some of the final scenes, and just some of the small character scenes, they they really just knock it out of the park there. Um, and I think if you're interested in the this setup of the story, there's this great watch of Batman's contingency plans on YouTube, which has Kevin Conroy as Batman just voicing like all his contingency plans basically for a lot of the members of the league. And I think it's more based on the Tower of Babel storyline, but it of course it's related to this, and it's an incredible watch, and I think like it really does send chills like up and down my spine, honestly, when I'm hearing it. It's a really great video. If you enjoy the video, please do leave a like and do subscribe.